Neurological Basis Psychopharmacology 2, Neurotransmitters by Dr. GS Shankar, Mississippi, PharmD, BCPP, Associate Professor of Pharmacy Practice, Psychiatry. Learning objectives. Describe the main types of cells in the brain. Identify the role of brain pathways. Learn various types of neurotransmitters. Describe various roles of neurons. Be familiar with the 6 major neurotransmitters: acetylcholine, 3 monoamines, GABA, and glutamate. Learn their pathways, their abnormalities, and their effects in various possible side effects. Be familiar with the mechanism of EPS. Evaluate the role of the 6 major neurotransmitters in psychiatric disorders. The brain is made of 2 types of cells, neurons and glial cells. Glial cells provide structural support, supply nutrients, remove waste, repair damage, and provide insulation. Neurons process information, receive, integrate, and transmit information. The brain is made of approximately 100 billion nerve cells and 100 trillion synapses called neurons. The roles of neurons are to process and transmit the basic information in the central nervous system, spinal cord, and peripheral nervous system. Think of the brain as the power line that connects 2 brain regions. Brain pathways are made up of interconnected neurons along which signals are transmitted from one brain region to another. There are many ways to classify neurotransmitters. First, we have acetylcholine, often abbreviated as ACH. Then there are the monoamines, which include norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, melatonin, and histamine. Amino acids also play a role. These include glutamate, gamma, aminobutyric acid, aspartate, and glycine. Additionally, we have purines such as adenosine, ATP, GTP, and their derivatives. Peptides are another category. Interestingly, single ions like synaptically released zinc are also considered neurotransmitters by some. And let's not forget a few gases such as nitric oxide. It's important to note that not all neurotransmitters are equally important. Let's dive into the roles of neurons. First up, we have excitatory neurons. In the central nervous system, these are often glutamatergic. Neurons of the peripheral nervous system, such as spinal motor neurons that synapse onto muscle cells, often use acetylcholine as their excitatory neurotransmitter. Then we have inhibitory neurons. The primary inhibitory neurotransmitter is GABA. Finally, we have modulatory neurons. They evoke more complex effects, which we call neuromodulation. These neurons use neurotransmitters such as dopamine, acetylcholine, serotonin, and others. Let's talk neurotransmitters. We'll cover acetylcholine monoamines like dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine, as well as glutamate and GABA. Starting with acetylcholine, the primary cholinergic input to the cerebral cortex comes from the basal nucleus of Meynert, which is the most prominent structure in the substantia innominata, adjacent to the hypothalamus. Acetylcholine was discovered in the 1920s, making it the first known neurotransmitter. You can find it in the brain, neuromuscular junctions, and spinal cord. It's involved in memory, cognition, and movement. It facilitates communication between motor neurons and muscles, creating excitatory messages that lead to muscle contraction. Compared with the normal brain, there is reduced acetylcholine transmission in cognition disorders. The degeneration of acetylcholine-containing neurons in both subcortical and cortical regions may account for the memory loss typical of dementia. In the periphery, it can increase body secretions and cause bradycardia. Now, acetylcholine deficiency syndrome can lead to low energy, decreased memory and cognition, disorientation, social withdrawal, despair, and lack of joy. Diseases associated with acetylcholine deficiency include cognition disorders and Alzheimer's disease. Moving on to dopamine. Dopamine is a derivative of the amino acid tyrosine and is produced by neurons located in the substantia nigra, which is part of the basal ganglia. Dopamine plays a vital role in motivation and salience and is the most abundant neurotransmitter in the corpus striatum, which is centered with the coordination of movement. It's highly concentrated in parts of the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, limbic system, and hypothalamus. The neurons synthesizing dopamine are located in the midbrain, hypothalamus, and olfactory bulb. There are 5 dopamine receptors, with D1 and D2 being the most studied. Now on to dopamine pathways. The nigrostriatal pathway accounts for about 75% of the dopamine in the brain and is essential in motor function. The mesolimbic pathway is a significant target for antipsychotic drugs, regulating the rewarding properties of various stimuli, including drugs of abuse. The mesocortical pathway influences emotional effects and is also a major target for antipsychotic drugs. The tuberoinfundibular pathway provides inhibitory regulation of prolactin release. Dopamine receptors have different functional roles. The striatum, which is involved in motor control, has D1 and D3 types. The limbic system, which is associated with emotions and stereotypic behavior, has D1 and D2 types. The cortex, related to arousal and mood, also has D1 and D2 types. The ventral hypothalamus, involved in prolactin secretion, is another area of interest. What is EPS? It's caused by the decrease of dopamine. Acute dystonia, Parkinsonism, and akathisia occur early in treatment, while tardive dyskinesia, tardive dystonia, and tardive akathisia usually occur after years of treatment. EPS are dose-dependent, and typical antipsychotics are more likely to cause EPS compared to atypical antipsychotics. Now let's discuss serotonin. It's an important CNS transmitter and neuromodulator of dopamine and norepinephrine. The Raphe nucleus in the pons is the source of serotonin. There are 17 receptors, with 5-HT1A associated with anxiety and depression, and 5-HT2A and 5-HT2C linked to depression and schizophrenia. Disorders modulated by 5-HT include panic disorder, phobia, depressed mood, schizophrenia, food cravings, bulimia, and obsessions and compulsions. Next, the noradrenergic pathway. Noradrenaline is secreted by adrenal glands in response to stress or arousal, regulating alertness, anxiety, and tension. The locus coeruleus is the most prominent cluster, found in the dorsal portion of the caudal pons. Noradrenaline deficiency can lead to impaired attention, problems concentrating, deficiencies in working memory, slowness of information processing, depressed mood, psychomotor retardation, and fatigue. Disorders associated with noradrenaline deficiency include major depressive disorder, ADHD, eating disorders, bipolar disorder, panic disorder, and anxiety disorder. Now, GABA and its pathway. GABA is the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter in the central nervous system and is present fairly uniformly throughout the brain. GABAergic inhibition is seen at all levels of the CNS, including the hypothalamus, hippocampus, and cerebral cortex. GABA deficiency syndrome can lead to anxiety, panic attacks, trouble relaxing, low stress tolerance, trembling, sleep problems, increased heart rate, and a family history of anxiety. Factors that reduce GABA levels include deficiencies in vitamins B1, B6, zinc, manganese, and iron, chronic stress, chronic pain, inadequate sleep, alcohol withdrawal, and caffeine excess. Finally, glutamate and its pathway. Glutamate is the main fast excitatory transmitter in the CNS. It's widely and uniformly distributed and highly concentrated in the CNS. Glutamate receptors are most abundant in the cortex, basal ganglia, and sensory pathways. Psychiatric conditions associated with glutamate abnormality include Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, and Huntington's diseases, tardive dyskinesia, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, chronic pain, and drug tolerance and abuse. Glutamate and GABA are the brain's major workhorse neurotransmitters. Over half of all brain synapses release glutamate, and 30 to 40% of all brain synapses release GABA. Since GABA is inhibitory and glutamate is excitatory, both neurotransmitters work together to control many processes, including the brain's overall level of excitation. Many drugs of abuse affect either glutamate or GABA or both to exert tranquilizing or stimulating effects on the brain. So what exactly is EPS? It's caused by the decrease of dopamine. Acute dystonia, Parkinsonism, and akathisia are symptoms that occur early in treatment. Tardive dyskinesia, tardive dystonia, and tardive akathisia usually occur after years of treatment. EPS are dose-dependent, and typical antipsychotics are more likely to cause EPS compared to atypical antipsychotics. To wrap things up, human behavior is a function of the brain. The role of the endocrine system as the chemical messenger system within the body is crucial. Hormones act as the chemical messengers, and we can think of the endocrine system as the post office that delivers these messages throughout the body.